Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to import designs with the new Workshop Framework settlement layout system. So if you head into the settlement that has the layouts that you have installed, you can head to your workbench and click this Manage button. Now if you don't have that Manage button, I will show you how to deal with that in a moment. So you're going to hit Settlement Layout here, and then you're going to see this Build Manage Layouts option. Now for those of you guys on Xbox, you will not have this export option because that's not currently possible. But you go to Build Manage Layouts, and if it tells you none found, it means you either haven't installed any or they're not installed correctly. So check on those to make sure you have those ESP or ESL files enabled in your plugin screen, or your load order screen rather. So if you have them installed correctly, you should be able to cycle through them. Now I created just 2 copies of the same one just to show this cycling. So you can see here I have the Sunshine Farm and Sunshine Farm alternate. And just for explanation of where all this data is coming from, for those of you guys who are doing the exporting and you're curious, the top line up there, Sunshine Titans Co-op Settlement, that's just dynamically created by the game. Next up is layout. That's the line that you get to label it. So something, generally you want to keep it short and sweet there, but at least something to explain what it is, because one of the other ways this can be used outside of actual full settlement designs is just chunks of settlements. For example, just say the outer walls or just the sanctuary rooftops, things like that. So in those cases, you might want to just name it succinctly that, just something like sanctuary rooftops repaired or something like that is the layout name. And then if you want to get more detailed, you can put it in the description, which is available through this layout information button. And then obviously designer, that's your name. On the web tool, you got to punch that in. So you're going to see who made the layout, what the layout's name is here at a glance, and then you can choose the ones you want and hit use this layout. Now there is no limit to the number of layouts that you apply to any given settlement, but the items will intersect with each other. This does no detection on that. It doesn't care if they intersect. It's allowing you to do that, and obviously you can overload your system using a bunch of these layouts. So keep that in mind if you're going crazy with using these. But the idea here is you can apply as many of these as you want, and once they're applied, you can do different things with them, which I'll show you in a moment. But you do not have to keep those things installed after you use them. So if you're running if you're running into script data limit issues, which many of you guys have heard me talk about, basically there's a limit to how many mods with script data can be loaded at any given time. And so if you're starting to run into that, disabling these layouts after you've installed them with this system is a good way to do it, although there are benefits to keeping them around if you've got the script data limit or script data available. Unfortunately, talking about script data, there's no way to check how much you're using. Just you can make rough guesses based on the size of the ESPs that are available, but other than that, there's no real way to guarantee that you're under it. You'll know if you are over it because you'll hit the infinite Vault-Tec loading icon when you try to load your save. So that's how you can check if you've got that issue. So disabling some of these can sometimes help. But let's go back to the layout information. So if you click on this, you will get a little description that the designer included, explaining what it is that this layout's going to do for you. And then you can hit use. And then it's going to ask you a few questions here. So by default, layouts come with something called a scrap profile. And what that means is that Workshop Framework will be able to selectively scrap your settlement so that it looks the same as the designer envisioned it. But there are a few options you can get around that. So some of you won't want that. Some of you will want to do your scrapping manually. Some of you maybe are applying these layouts on top of your existing build. So you have a few different options here. So the first option, yes, build it. This will leave anything you, the player, built alone, but it will scrap anything from the vanilla game that the designer had also scrapped in their layout. Next up is build it but skip any scrapping. This will again leave your items alone. It will also leave all of the vanilla items alone, and it will basically just build all of the items in this layout on top of whatever's there. Then the last option, this is the one you should use if you had a settlement designed there, you don't care about it anymore, and you just want to have your stuff replaced by whatever the designer had. Then you would want to use this, scrap everything here, and then build it. This would be the option I'm going to choose here, and we're going to go ahead and hit that. And then if you have HUD Framework installed, you'll get this little set of progress bars in the corner, and as you can see, it's slowly starting to scrap a few vanilla items that I had scrapped in my version of this design on my other save. And then eventually items will start appearing. This is a very fast process. In fact, you can see cleanup settlement's gone now. It says importing settlement. And if you have the script extender, which is not required to do imports, it is required to do exports on PC, but this is why Xbox players can use it. If you have the script extender on PC, you will get this step as well, creating power lines. So if you're on Xbox, what will happen instead is all of the items that use power will become self-powered, which if you are a user of city plans, you'll be familiar with that. The items will just become self-powered, and that self-power option can be disabled in the settings. So if you want to just manually wire this stuff all yourself, you can do that. But the default option is to just self-power, because I figure most people don't have the patience to go through and manually rewire all this stuff. But if that's you, if you'd rather have power lines, you don't like the idea of the self-powering items because it's too cheaty or whatever, you can disable that. But for PC players with F4SE, it will create the power grid correctly. One thing to know is, because of a little bug that I found in the wiring system F4SE provides, is it will force you into workshop mode. And that is just an oddity about this. And I think it's just such a corner case that the F4SE team never ran into it. But basically, if you own a settlement that you've never gone into workshop mode in, wire creation fails. And I don't know why this is. I'm sure it's some weird little quirk that Bethesda accidentally coded in. It's just circumstantial. But because Workshop Framework allows you to claim settlements without actually going into workshop mode, this could be a problem for Workshop Framework users. So I felt it was just better to solve this by forcing everyone into workshop mode, because there's no way to detect if you had been in it prior, other than if I were to just start monitoring that and recording it. And even then, on every new save, it wouldn't know. So this is just a safety precaution to make sure it works. And my assumption is most of you are just trying to get this design in. Whatever it takes to get there, great. And as you saw, the build process is very fast. So this doesn't really add that much more time, but it'll pop you into workshop mode, and then it will finish up, and then it should start creating wires. And here you go. You can see the wires start popping up. Now this also works with snapped power. So if the design had conduit or the Vault-Tec workshop pieces, which transmit power through snap, those will all get restored as well. The only thing this will not correctly do are those contraption items that have multiple connections. Those do not work correctly. For those of you guys who like using those in designs, or you're grabbing a design, you'll probably want to use transfer settlements for those. Workshop Framework can handle everything but those. It's something that I may add support for, but that will never be something that will work correctly on Xbox, because you guys don't have the ability to have things wired anyway. You will have to manually wire those. So keep that in mind. That is the only thing I'm aware of that this doesn't handle well. So small little corner case as far as I'm concerned. But once it's finished creating power lines, it'll tell you can exit workshop. And usually once this happens, as soon as we hit OK, you're going to get the completion. Now that timer is only accurate if you don't sit there and talk for a minute and a half when you're explaining things to somebody. If you hit OK, it's generally going to be, because this timer is still running in the background while we were sitting there talking. But this whole import process for settlement of this size, this is pretty small settlement, takes under a minute. For larger settlements, it might take 2 or 3 minutes. It really depends on how many items the designer included. Now, one thing you guys will notice in here, and probably anticipated, this has a lot of sim settlements plots in it. Now, the plots will be empty at first, but they will automatically fill in the background. You do not have to sit around and wait for them to do that. So all of the designs, when imported through Workshop Framework, will go exactly as the designer had them, so long as you are on the build of Sim Settlements that came out when this layout feature came out, which is version 4.2.5 of Sim Settlements. So as long as you're at least on that version, then you will be able to get exactly what the designer built. So that includes things like skipping parts of the tech tree, skins on their building plans. Basically everything will come out exactly the same. It does, of course, assume you have any add-on packs they installed. So if you're missing any of those add-on packs, what will happen instead is Sim Settlements will just replace whatever was on the plot for that designer with whatever you have installed. It'll just pick something at random. So you'll have that option as well. So, but otherwise it will try its best. Sim Settlements will try its best to exactly replicate what the designer had. All right, so that covers it. So that was very easy there. Now let's go back over to our layout menu, and I'll show you some of the options available. So if we go to Manage and we hit Settlement Layout again, and then we go back to Manage Layouts. Now before I do, first you'll see there's a Refresh All Layouts option. And the Refresh system is something City Plan users will be familiar with, or Sim Settlements users in general. Refresh is something I came up with because code placement can sometimes go funky. So sometimes if your game's just got too much going on, an attempt to place a lot of objects with scripts will go haywire, things won't work, and you'll end up with weird items all over the place, and being able to refresh the layout can resolve that. So let's go back in here. So you'll see that here is the design we're using. You'll see that the use this has been replaced by refresh this layout and scrap this layout. So we can actually refresh it, which would basically delete everything and then recreate it really quickly. And it will take just a little bit longer than it did to create everything. The scrap phase does take a minute or two, and then it will just rebuild it from scratch. So it's effectively the same thing as it's going through and scrapping everything manually and then coming back into the layout and hitting use this layout. So this is an advantage to keeping the layouts installed. If you were to uninstall the layout, you would not be able to do this. So the scrap this layout, one of the things that's cool about this is if you're using some layouts that are just chunks of a settlement, you'll be able to selectively remove pieces as opposed to having to go in and remove the entire thing. So again, in my reference of sanctuary rooftops repaired, you could do something like just remove those again later, or just remove the wall that was built or whatever. So layouts are designed very much to be chunked out because you can have up to 128 layouts assigned to any particular settlement. And if people started hitting the limitation on that 128 regularly, I could expand that, but I doubt anybody's going to hit that. I'm guessing most people, if the system takes off, I'm guessing 3 or 4 would make up a good settlement. So I love the idea though of the walls as one, or maybe districting out a settlement, things like that. So as you can see, we have another layout. I could place this as well. This is the exact same layout though. I just changed the name, so I'm not going to do that. That would just create those items on top. But I will show you guys the scrap this layout. So we'll go ahead and do this, and it will ask you to confirm, and then you'll get the little confirmation. As you can see, it just starts tearing everything down. Some settlements plots are designed to explode if this crashes your game. Likely it's because of that, and you can disable the demolition effects in some settlements so that doesn't happen. So keep that in mind. If you do crash while using the system, it's probably from that, because this is a very heavily threaded system. The other thing that this system, if this causes crashes for you, you might need to reduce the thread count. So if you go into the Workshop Framework holotape or MCM options, you will find that there is a new section, an advanced section. I'll show you an MCM. It's currently not working in this build that I have right now, but by the time I get this launched, it will be fixed, the actual changes. But it's just called max threads here, so it shows 10. The default is 50. This is a problem with MCM that I've got a bug report in with them. But anyway, if you reduce this max threads, try cutting in half, try it again. You want to keep this up as high as possible because the number of threads determines how quickly these operations can go. So if you were to drop that down to the minimum of 10, this process, all of these processes would take substantially longer than you're seeing happen on my game. I will also say, Xbox players, all of these processes will take longer because this is CPU bound. So Xbox has a substantially worse processor than most PC users will have, so it's not going to be able to chew through this quite as well. Xbox One X should go fairly quickly, but I think the original one and S will be a little bit slower. So I anticipate it taking a little bit longer than what I've just shown you. So that is how you remove those. And the last thing I want to show you are some of the options you have to control this. So if we go into our mod config, and anything I ever show you guys in MCM, you can also find this information in the Workshop Framework Controls holotape, which is craftable at a chem workbench. I've said that 16 times tonight because I've recorded multiple videos, so hopefully I got it. I didn't say it multiple times in this one particular video. But some things you have control over with the import. So if you go into Framework Controls here, and you look under the import layout options, there's a few things going on here. This lootable items collected. This is something that happens when scrapping is going on. So often in the vanilla settlements, there are random lootable items all over the place. So rather than risk those getting covered up by various items that get built, one of the default steps that happens when a layout is applied where you used the scrapping. So if you just hit build it or scrap everything and build it, it'll grab anything that's lootable in the settlement, anything at all, and it will just dump it into your workshop. And that's just a safety precaution. But if you are applying a layout to a settlement that you've been working on that has things like armor displays or the weapon displays from the DLC, those items are considered loose and lootable, and those will get dumped in as well. So keep that in mind. You might want to turn this off. Self-powered items, that's the thing I mentioned, where if you're on Xbox, this is going to be used by default, and you might want to turn that off here. It is off by default for PC players. If F4SE is installed, basically when you start up the mod, it will detect if you have F4SE. If so, it turns this off. Otherwise, it's going to be on. Spawn NPCs. So by default, as you can see in the export options, the animals are disabled, but there are other things people can arrange to export. Like, for example, they could arrange to export their settlers. That is, I believe I have that skipped automatically, and they would have to intentionally set that up. And other NPCs could be linked to the workshop. Power designers could arrange for various NPCs. So I assume most people are not going to want a bunch of random NPCs popping up, so this is off by default. But if the layout designer suggests you turn this on, you might want to do that. Same with power armor. I assume most of you don't want random free pursuits of power armor that the designer decided to put in, so I put this in your control if you're importing. Now, these options will likely expand in the future. They might be broken down into further smaller bits, like spawn NPCs might become spawn animals, spawn settlers, etc. This is just going to require user feedback. As people suggest more options, I will add them. I love adding options to my mods. The deeper, that's why I have these exhaustive menus. If you look at the Sim Settlements menu, it's ridiculous how many subsections there are, but the more options, the better as far as I'm concerned, to give you guys that power. But I also always like to make sure the default options are what I anticipate the majority will use, so you guys don't ever have to play with these options. But those are some options you have available there. Pop in and check those out. And again, if you are finding that this is crashing your system, one of two things is going on. Either you are hitting the thread limit, or you are probably have a bunch of Sim Settlement stuff going on, and that's just overwhelming your system from all that. And again, that can be controlled at the Sim Settlements level too. That also has a threading option you can play with. The last thing I think worth talking about are missing plugins. So one of the things that I wanted with this import-export system with Workshop Framework is to allow people to run layouts that they don't have all the mods for. It's often the case that people will release city plans or transfer settlements blueprints that require a ton of mods, or they might require Creation Club content. And this way you can just try using the layout and it will just build as much as it can. Workshop Framework will warn you that you have missing plugins, and you'll actually be able to see through a list of all of the missing plugins, but it will not stop you from building the layout anyway. So that way you can test out a layout. Perhaps it will have 90% of the items and it's good enough for you to continue from. And if you need to, if it's too barren, you can just scrap it, or exit the save, go download some more of those mods, and be on your way. So that, I think, covers all of the importing. So guys, if you have any questions, definitely post those below in the comments. I'll get back to you and maybe make a follow-up video. Otherwise, take care and enjoy the mods.